70% of ECRL revenue, not passengers. Freight. 665 kilometers of rail. Opening January 2027. Every story you have heard about the ECRL has been about the passengers. The 4-hour journey from Kota Baru to Kuala Lumpur. The tourism boost for Terengginu's beaches. The commuters from the East Coast states who will finally have a direct rail connection to the Klang Valley. That story is real. And it is 30% of the ECRL. The other 70%, the part that reshapes Malaysian logistics, changes how international shipping moves through Southeast Asia, and unlocks the economic potential of 3 states that have been sitting on resources with nowhere fast to send them. That story has barely been told. This video tells it. Welcome to Shifted Perspective. This channel covers what is actually happening before the mainstream figures it out. Subscribe right now so you never miss what we uncover. Hit like if you had no idea 70% of ECRL revenue comes from freight, not passengers. Drop one word in the comments, passengers or freight. Tell me which part of this story surprised you more. Let us get into it. To understand why the ECRL's freight story is bigger than its passenger story, you need to understand the geography problem it is solving. Because the problem is specific, measurable, and has been constraining Malaysian logistics for decades. Peninsular Malaysia is a long narrow landmass running roughly north to south with a mountain range, the Tidawangsa, running down its spine. The Klang Valley, Port Klang, Penang, and most of Malaysia's industrial and manufacturing base sit on the west coast. The South China Sea, Kuantan Port, and the natural resource wealth of Kelantan, Terengganu, and Pahang sit on the east coast. Moving goods between those two coastlines currently means one of two things. You put them on a truck and drive over or around the Tidawangsa on roads that are congested, costly, and increasingly burdened by the weight of heavy freight vehicles doing a journey they were never designed to make efficient. Or you put them on a ship and sail around the southern tip of the peninsula, through the Strait of Malacca, around Johor, and back up the east coast. A journey that adds days and significant cost to any cross-peninsula logistics operation. The East Coast Expressway, the primary road corridor for cross-peninsula freight, carries an estimated 60,000 vehicles per day, with heavy trucks accounting for a significant and growing share. The road surface degradation from overloaded haulage vehicles has become a documented policy problem. The Transport Ministry confirmed it is working on stricter measures to regulate overloaded haulage vehicles. Enforcement announcements are expected. The road network was not designed for the volume and weight it currently carries, and the maintenance cost of that mismatch is visible in the condition of the infrastructure itself. The ECRL solves this problem with a single infrastructure decision. 665 kilometers of electrified railway connecting Kota Baru and Kelantan to Port Klang in Selangor, bridging the east coast and west coast of peninsular Malaysia. Primarily a cargo route, the ECRL focuses on optimizing rail use with 70% capacity for freight and 30% for passengers, emphasizing industrial parks, logistics hubs, and transit-oriented developments. 70% capacity for freight. That number is in the project's foundational design documents. The ECRL was not designed as a passenger railway that happens to carry some freight. It was designed as a freight railway that also carries passengers. The revenue model reflects it. The infrastructure reflects it. The 5 dedicated cargo hubs in Pahang alone, linking industrial zones directly to the ports, reflect it. The 12 electric freight locomotives that arrived alongside the 11 passenger EMU train sets reflect it. The freight story is not an afterthought. It is the primary economic rationale for a 50 billion ringgit investment. The phrase that appears in every serious analysis of the ECRL's strategic significance is land bridge. And it deserves proper explanation rather than the casual mention it usually gets. Beyond passenger transit, the ECRL serves a geopolitical and economic purpose by acting as a land bridge. By connecting Kuantan Port on the east coast directly to Port Klang on the west coast, Malaysia can move cargo between the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean without relying solely on the congested shipping lanes of the Strait of Malacca. The Strait of Malacca is one of the world's most strategically important and most congested shipping lanes. Approximately 90,000 vessels pass through it every year. More than a quarter of global trade by volume transits this strait. It is also a strategic choke point, narrow, shallow in parts, and vulnerable to the kind of disruption that keeps maritime planners awake at night. Every major economy that relies on Malacca Strait shipping has a contingency interest in alternative routes. The ECRL creates one. A container that needs to move between the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean currently has 2 options. It sails through the Strait of Malacca, the established route that every carrier uses. or it uses the ECRL land bridge, offloading at Kuantan Port on the South China Sea, transferring to rail, crossing the peninsula in hours, and reloading at Port Klang for onward transit to the Indian Ocean and beyond. The shipping times saved will be less than the Thailand bridge, 1 or a maximum of 2 days perhaps, but it is shortly to become a reality, and the gains and efficiency of the superfast logistics necessary to make the project viable will be put to the test. 1 to 2 days. In global container shipping, 1 to 2 days is not a marginal improvement. It is the difference between making a connection and missing it. It is the difference between a perishable cargo arriving in condition and arriving out of condition. It is the difference between a manufacturing JIT delivery working and failing. For specific cargo categories and specific trade routes, 1 to 2 days of time saving is a contract rewriting difference. The MOU signed between Kuantan Port Consortium, Northport Malaysia at Port Klang, and Malaysia Rail Link is the most concrete evidence that this land bridge is not theoretical. The MOU outlines a comprehensive collaboration among all parties across several key areas, including coordinating efforts between the parties to ensure a smooth integration of rail and port operations as well as cargo movement between Kuantan Port and Northport via the ECRL. 3 major port and rail operators signing a formal memorandum of understanding to coordinate their operations before the railway opens is the signal that the commercial case has already been validated at the institutional level. Companies do not sign MOUs for infrastructure that has not proven its commercial viability. They sign MOUs because the freight is coming and they need the operational framework in place to handle it. The land bridge and the port-to-port connection are the headline strategic story. But the ECRL's freight impact on Malaysia's domestic industrial landscape is equally significant and even less covered. ECRL freight trains are planned to operate at up to 80 km per hour with 5 dedicated cargo hubs in Pahang alone, linking industrial zones directly to the ports. Official publications emphasize that this configuration is intended to support automotive exports, petrochemicals and other export-oriented industries clustered around Kuantan and Gebeng. Kuantan and Gebeng. These are not household names in global manufacturing discussions, but they are home to some of Malaysia's most significant industrial assets. The Gebeng industrial area hosts major petrochemical facilities including BASF, Petronas Chemicals and Eastman Chemical among others. The Malaysia-China Kuantan Industrial Park, a bilateral industrial zone between Malaysia and China, is one of the largest such zones in Southeast Asia with companies producing steel, aluminium, and industrial materials at significant scale. These industries produce heavy, bulky, high-volume goods that are expensive to move by road and that benefit enormously from rail freight access to both a West Coast port and an East Coast port simultaneously. By shifting large volumes of cargo from lorries to rail, planners aim to reduce highway congestion, cut transport emissions and lower logistics costs for manufacturers. Recent memoranda of understanding involving Malaysia Rail Link, Kuantan Port operators, Northport at Port Klang and major shippers underscore the focus on building an integrated rail-sea logistics chain ahead of the line's opening. These agreements outline plans for dedicated freight services, railport terminals and value-added distribution facilities that would leverage the ECRL's cross-peninsula alignment as a shorter alternative to road-based east-west trucking. Value-added distribution facilities, railport terminals, integrated rail-sea logistics chain. These are not transportation terms. They are industrial investment terms. They describe the kind of supply chain infrastructure that attracts manufacturers who need reliable, cost-efficient, high-volume logistics as a precondition for their investment decision. The ECRL's freight infrastructure is not just reducing transport costs for existing industries. It is creating the logistics conditions that make new industrial investment viable in locations that were previously too expensive or too slow to supply efficiently. Here is the piece of the ECRL freight story that almost no coverage has explained clearly, and it changes the timeline picture significantly. The ECRL is being delivered in 2 phases. Phase 1 covers Kota Baru to Gombak, the main 519-kilometer trunk line, and is opening in January 2027. Phase 2 covers Gombak to Port Klang, the final western extension completing the port-to-port connection. Phase 2 is slated to complete by late 2027 or early 2028. Once Phase 2 opens, the line creates a full port-to-port freight corridor between Kuantan Port and Port Klang, a key catalyst for East Coast industrial zones. Direct port connectivity reduces reliance on long-haul trucking over the Titiwangsa Range and unlocks two-way cargo flows. This means the January 2027 opening delivers most but not all of the freight revolution. Phase 1 connects the East Coast states to the Klang Valley and to existing rail connections that can reach Port Klang through the existing network. The full seamless port-to-port rail corridor, where a container can be loaded at Kuantan Port, transferred directly to ECRL rail, and unloaded at Port Klang without intermediate handling, completes when Phase 2 opens in late 2027 or early 2028. The January 2027 opening is the start of the freight revolution. The late 2027 Phase 2 completion is the moment it reaches full operational capability. 4 freight operators and industrial companies planning their logistics around the ECRL. Understanding this two-phase delivery is the difference between an operational plan that works on day 1 and one that requires revision when Phase 2 is not yet open. Here is what intellectual honesty requires before this video ends. The ECRL land bridge is a compelling strategic concept. It is also, at least initially, a route that needs to prove its commercial competitiveness against established Malacca Strait shipping. Shipping companies operate on very thin margins per container. The ECRL land bridge adds port handling, rail transfer, and second port handling costs that do not exist when a vessel simply sails through the strait. For the land bridge to win freight away from existing sea routes, it needs to offer a combination of time saving, cost efficiency, and reliability that justifies those additional handling steps. The gains and efficiency of the superfast logistics necessary to make the project viable will be put to the test. That sentence from the National published May 2026 is the honest framing. The land bridge concept is proven in principle. The commercial viability at scale depends on the operational execution, the turnaround times at both ports, the rail frequency, the container handling efficiency, and the pricing that MRL and the port operators set for the integrated service. The MOU between Kuantan Port, Northport and MRL is the institutional framework. The commercial results over the first 12 to 18 months of operations will determine whether the ECRL land bridge becomes a mainstream logistics route or remains a niche alternative for specific cargo categories and specific trade corridors. The evidence from comparable land bridge operations elsewhere, the new Silk Road rail corridors between China and Europe, the Trans-Siberian Container Service, suggests that land bridges win freight gradually as operators gain confidence in reliability and as pricing becomes more competitive. Not all at once on opening day. The ECRL opens in January 2027 with 70% of its revenue model built on freight, not passengers. 12 electric freight locomotives ready to operate. 5 dedicated cargo hubs in Pahang linking industrial zones to ports. A formal MOU between Kuantan Port, Northport and Malaysia Rail Link creating the integrated rail sea logistics chain. A Phase 2 extension to Port Klang completing in late 2027 or early 2028 that creates the full port-to-port corridor. This is not the ECRL story you have been hearing. The story you have been hearing is about passengers cutting their journey from 8 hours to 4. That story is 30% of the revenue model. The freight story, the land bridge, the industrial zones, the cross-peninsula logistics revolution, the alternative to the Strait of Malacca for specific cargo categories, is 70% of why this project was built and why it costs 50 billion ringgit. Malaysia is not just building a passenger railway. It is building the logistics infrastructure of a country that has decided its economic geography should no longer be constrained by a mountain range and a congested shipping lane. January 2027 is when that decision becomes operational. I want to hear from you specifically on this one. Are you in the logistics or shipping industry? Are you a manufacturer on the east coast of Malaysia who has been waiting for this freight corridor? Drop your industry and your read on what the ECRL freight story changes for you in the comments. One sentence. And the question I want everyone to answer, does the ECRL land bridge become a mainstream alternative to Malacca Strait shipping within 5 years of opening? Yes or no? Subscribe right now because Shifted Perspective is tracking every phase of this story through to January 2027 and beyond. I will see you in the next one.